Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we are heading to the Pacific Theater in World War II. Specifically, we're going to be looking into the story of the USS Tang, a submarine with a really incredible track record, but one that met a rather unusual end.
Unusual indeed.
Not by enemy fire, but
Yeah.
by one of its own torpedoes.
It's a crazy story.
We're going to be drawing on an article titled USS Tang, Tragedy in the Formosa Strait to uncover the details of this pretty gripping tale.
Well, the setting itself adds a lot to the story, too. We're
Oh,
talking
see.
October 1944. The Tang is patrolling the Formosa Strait, this narrow passageway, basically, between mainland China and Taiwan. So you're the Japanese military at this point in the war. You need to move central supplies, right? You got troops, fuel between Japan and those territories that you occupy in Southeast Asia. Formosa Strait's the most direct route, but it's also super dangerous. Shallow waters, tons of enemy activity. That's where the Tang comes in.
So the strait is a prime target for the Americans,
Absolutely.
but a real risk for the Japanese. And the Tang wasn't just any submarine, right?
Oh, no, not at all.
It had a reputation.
Big time. This was the Tang, commanded by Richard O'Kane, a leader known for his, well, aggressive tactics, maybe even bordering on daring.
Mm-hmm.
Under his command, the Tang had already sunk a remarkable number of Japanese ships. I mean, the crew, they were top-notch. They were really at the top of their game. Plus, they had some of the most advanced weaponry of the time. We're talking about, the Mark 18 torpedoes, formidable pieces of equipment.
You mentioned those Mark 18 torpedoes. I'm no naval expert, so for those of us listening who might not be either, what made these so special?
Oh, these were not your average torpedoes. The Mark 18 was for its time a true marvel of engineering, packed a massive 575-pound warhead, designed to cripple, if not outright sink, large warships. So you can only imagine the kind of havoc it could wreak on a convoy of, say, supply ships.
So we've got a highly successful submarine, a skilled and aggressive crew, powerful torpedoes, and they're all operating in this strategically crucial but dangerous area. What happened when the Tang encountered that Japanese convoy in the Formosa Strait?
Okay, so picture this. It's October 1944. The Tang finds itself in a perfect position to strike a major blow against the Japanese. They launch a series of attacks, and the results are just devastating. The article we're referencing really captures the chaos and destruction as torpedo after torpedo finds its mark.
How successful was this attack?
Oh, the Tang managed to sink, get this, 7 enemy vessels,
Mhm.
and I mean in quick succession. They were just tearing through that convoy.
Wow. 7 ships, that's a massive victory. But I understand things took a dramatic turn.
Dramatic is an understatement. So with the convoy in disarray, Commander O'Kane is getting ready to launch his final 2 torpedoes. He's aiming at a large troop transport ship. This could have been the final blow, the knockout punch, but as he gives the order to fire, the second torpedo malfunctions.
What caused the malfunction?
Well, seems like a faulty gyroscope threw the torpedo off course. In the simplest terms, think of a gyroscope like a spinning top. Keeps the torpedo moving in a straight line.
So instead of heading towards the enemy transport...
The torpedo makes a sharp turn and starts heading back toward the Tang.
Wait, their own torpedo turned on them. It's incredible. What did they do?
The sonar operator, you can only imagine the horror when he realized what was happening.
Oh, yeah.
O'Kane immediately orders evasive maneuvers. But in those shallow waters, with a torpedo closing in so fast, it's just not enough time.
So the Tang, moments from what could have been a decisive victory, is now facing its own weapon. What happened next? I mean, can you describe the impact?
Well, the article paints a pretty devastating picture. The torpedo, and remember this thing is carrying that massive warhead we were talking about, slams right into the Tang's stern. The aft torpedo room, that's where the torpedoes were stored, it's just obliterated, gone. The force of the explosion is so powerful it throws the entire submarine into a near vertical position. You got to try to imagine the chaos inside. Sailors are getting thrown against bulkheads, equipment's ripped loose, and then there's the deafening roar of the explosion itself. It must have been absolute pandemonium.
And to make things worse, they were in shallow water, which means...
Exactly. There's not much time. The Tang starts sinking rapidly. And for the sailors in those forward compartments, the situation was beyond dire. I mean, they're trapped inside a sinking submarine over 150 feet below the surface.
What options did they even have for escape? It's not like they had those sophisticated escape pods you see in modern submarines.
No
No.
escape pods. Their only hope was something called a Momsen lung. It was basically a rudimentary rebreather, a very early form of scuba gear, let's say, allowed them to breathe a limited amount of oxygen while ascending to the surface. Can you imagine the sheer terror of putting your faith in such a basic device, knowing that your life depends on it?
It must have taken incredible courage to even attempt an escape under those circumstances.
Absolutely. And tragically, not everyone made it out alive. Of the 87 men aboard the Tang, only 13 managed to escape the sinking wreckage.
13 survivors out of 87. That's a staggering loss of life.
Yeah. It's a stark reminder of just how risky submarine warfare really was, even for the most skilled and successful crews. And even for those who did manage to escape, their ordeal wasn't over. The article goes on to describe how 4 more men perished during the ascent, succumbing to injuries, exhaustion, equipment failure.
So even after surviving the sinking, they were still facing incredible odds.
You said it. There's this one detail in the article that I found both heartbreaking and inspiring at the same time. One of the sailors, in this incredible act of ingenuity, used his own pants as a flotation device to help him reach the surface.
Wow, that's remarkable. Even in the face of such a disaster, human ingenuity can be pretty incredible. But what about those survivors who did make it to the surface? I mean, they were still in enemy waters, right?
You're exactly right. And the Japanese weren't exactly waiting with open arms. The survivors were captured by Japanese sailors, many of whom had just witnessed the Tang's attack on their convoy. The article talks about the anger and resentment they faced from their captors.
So they escaped a sinking submarine only to be captured by the enemy they had just attacked. What happened to them then?
They endured beatings, harsh treatment. The survivors later recalled that some of the Japanese sailors were particularly brutal, seeking revenge for the losses they had suffered.
Was Commander O'Kane among the survivors? What became of him?
Yes, O'Kane was one of the lucky ones. He survived the sinking and the capture. Later on, he wrote about his experience, and there's this one chilling observation he made. He said the beatings, they were endured with less prejudice once the Japanese sailors realized they were facing the very men who had sunk their ships.
That's a haunting detail, a glimpse into the, well, kind of the complex emotions of war where you have respect and hatred existing side by side.
It's definitely a lot to process. But even then, their ordeal was far from over. The captured crew members were taken to Japanese prisoner of war camps where they faced horrific conditions. We're talking about torture, starvation, disease.
It's hard to even imagine what those men went through. But I'm assuming, despite everything, O'Kane and at least some of his crew survived the war.
They did. And O'Kane's story, it's one of incredible resilience. His leadership, even in the face of such adversity, both during the sinking and in captivity, it's really inspiring. He was eventually awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions during the Tang's final patrol.
So even in this tragedy, the legacy of the Tang and its crew lived on. But, as we've been discussing, the Tang wasn't lost in some typical battle. It was sunk by its own torpedo. This raises a really interesting question. Would the Tang's legacy be different if it had been sunk by an enemy attack?
That's a fascinating question. It really makes you think about how we perceive heroism, victory, and defeat in the context of war. Does a self-inflicted loss somehow diminish the accomplishments of the Tang and its crew? Or does it add another layer of tragedy to their story?
Yeah, it really makes you think about how we shape these narratives around historical events. If the Tang had gone down fighting an enemy vessel, would it be more celebrated? Would it be more widely remembered? Like, would it have become the symbol of heroic defiance against impossible odds?
It's definitely possible. There's a certain romanticism attached to the image of a ship going down guns blazing,
Right.
fighting right to the very end.
Right.
But I think the fact that the Tang was sunk by its own weapon, it adds this really unique layer of complexity, and irony to the story. It really challenges those traditional ideas we have about victory and defeat in war,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to something like submarine warfare.
Exactly. Here we have this submarine that achieved remarkable success, right? I mean, they sunk an incredible number of enemy ships. And then to be undone by a technical malfunction, it's almost like, a cruel twist of fate.
It is. It really makes you question those clear-cut definitions of winning and losing, especially in the chaos of war. Nothing's ever black and white, is it? The Tang story, it really forces us to confront that unpredictable nature of conflict. It reminds us that even with superior technology, meticulous planning, a highly skilled crew, there's always those elements of chance, the unknown. War is rarely straightforward. It's not a game you can predict.
And maybe that's what makes the Tang story so powerful. It's a reminder that even in the midst of triumph, disaster can strike.
Oh, absolutely.
It highlights how fragile victory can be and how there's always that potential for things to go wrong, even when it seems like everything's going right. And it's a stark reminder of the human cost of war.
Yeah. We often get caught up in the technological advances or, the strategic victories.
Right.
But we have to remember the individuals who put their lives on the line. Those submariners, they faced incredible risks every time they went out on patrol.
Especially in World War II. I mean, the conditions they faced were unimaginable. Thinking about the Tang's crew, especially those who went through the sinking and then capture and imprisonment, I mean, their resilience is it's awe-inspiring. They endured so much, physically and mentally, and yet they never gave up.
Commander O'Kane, he's a prime example. His leadership during the sinking and then later in captivity, it speaks volumes about the strength of the human spirit. I mean, even in the darkest of circumstances, he kept hope alive. It's that kind of unwavering spirit that we should remember when we think about the legacy of the USS Tang.
So how should we remember the Tang? I mean, what's its lasting legacy?
I think the Tang story really it encapsulates both the triumphs and the tragedies of submarine warfare. It's a testament to the incredible courage, the skill, and the sacrifice of the submariners, particularly those who served in World War II. But it's also this cautionary tale. It's a reminder of the risks they faced, the unpredictable nature of combat, and how there's always the potential for unforeseen consequences.
It's a story that really makes us, as you were saying, think critically about war, right? About the complexities, about the balance between technology and the human element, and about how we define victory and defeat.
And maybe most importantly, it reminds us that the stories of those who served, their bravery, their sacrifices, those stories deserve to be remembered and honored, regardless of the circumstances of their loss.
Well, this deep dive into the USS Tang's final mission has been incredibly thought-provoking. It's a story that really stays with you.
I agree.
And it leaves us with a lot to think about.
It does. I think the next time you hear about military victory or, some amazing new piece of technology, remember the USS Tang. Remember the men who served on her and the sacrifices they made.
And remember that sometimes, maybe even most times, the most important lessons, they come not from triumph, but from tragedy. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive, and we'll see you next time.